And you think government is doing, or Eskom is doing everything it has to clear up that in progress line there?
We meet with and the chairperson is here. He knows.
I know, that's why I'm asking the question. He can hear what you say.
He knows that we engages with his management team on a weekly basis on this. So this is tracked as part of a tracking process to be able to ensure that we get those updates.
We haven't gotten me to add, as I'm leaving.
Sorry?
It still takes too long in South Africa.
Yes, does.
This entire process takes too long in South Africa. There are still possibilities for shortening the time, and if this is an emergency, which it is, each empire needs to give up some of its powers on the one hand and act with a greater sense of urgency. There are many countries in the world that are doing it between 8 months and 15 months. We're still heading for 2 years and 2.5 years. It's just unacceptable. Sorry to put the dark cloud there, but I think we've got to confront that reality in South Africa. We're too slow.
Would you mind, Rudy, if we as a commission look into this matter as to are there any delays that can be done away with?
Yeah.
And then it gets reported by our team to the commission at the next, not to show anybody up, but with the purposes of maybe assisting. So I'll ask Crispian and his team to go into this matter and say, because you hear it all the time, that government is talking about this, but they delay Eskom, Eskom doesn't want it because they see competition, so they slow it down, and all sorts of things you hear. So let's just get into it and then report on the thing, and maybe we can, out of that, make some film. What do you think? That by the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Deputy Chair, just to give you some comfort, and I know Minister and I...
I'm only saying this because this is a game changer.
No, it is.
If we can unlock this, we're in a different place in the country, actually.
So let me just say to you, where these chaps are at, when they're doing a BQ, they already got environmental authorization, right? They've got most authorizations that don't require or depend on another authorization, right? So this is more or less, to many of them, quite the second last phase. Right?
And the financial packages are in place.
Yeah, so so the financial close could happen. So once they've got this, it's when they can go and register. That's the last phase.
They do the financial close, obviously,
so once they register,
after they get the go-ahead from Eskom.
Yeah. Once they get the go-ahead, this is the most important part, because no financier is going to give you money until you have all your authorizations and you have grid connection. So once you do this, you then go to NERSA, you register your project. Now, let me show you what we've done. Again, there's another graph, but I've not added in here. But for NERSA used to take, you remember the argument we used to have with NERSA around how long they take. Because bear in mind also that this is new, right? So we had to find our feet, and I was saying this to Minister. Sometimes the process was never designed. The grid connection unit at Eskom was a small group connection unit. They didn't have to deal with many applications. And suddenly they have a flurry of people all coming in, hundreds of different, asking for different connections. So they had to capacitate that, engineers, accountants and stuff like that. But the main thing is that NERSA, for example, used to be one of the slowest. They used to take 90 days for registration. They on average do it now in 19 days, 19. The biggest constraint, let me actually be honest with you, around getting the projects to construction is this phase, because it does take long. You have to have the technical specifications, you have to have all the details around the connections, you have to build the substations and various transmission or distribution lines that connect where you build your plant to a grid, right? That's really the longest. The second longest is, unfortunately, EIAs. Right? EIAs is another factor. But the Minister of Environmental Affairs has done exceptionally well in trying to reduce that, quite significantly so. So what we've done, we've taken the EIAs and we allow these projects to be registered as SIPS projects. So what that automatically does is it reduces us from over 120 odd days to 57 days. She's gone even further. where the build is on low environmental sensitive land, you exempt it from EIAs in that sense. So I think that she's heard us, but Minister is right. I mean, we've been trying to push the ESCOM team to move quite fast on cost estimate letters, to budget quotes, and then of course moving to registration. There's another lengthy process, and I was hoping he was here because I was going to tell him this, is that many of the off-takers on this are miners, right, or heavy industrial users. So they have large tracts of land, and they're in the most ideal position where they can build PV plants. And of course, when they built their mine, it was for a, Section 53 in the MPRDA is for building a mine, right? So unfortunately, we have this onerous process of, if you want to change your land use, you have to apply under Section 53 of the MPRDA, despite the fact that you're not digging out stuff of the ground, which is, of course, much more environmentally sensitive. You're building them, but you have to go through the process of then requesting the MPRDA and the DMRE officials that I need to actually utilize my land also for building a 100 megawatt PV plant or 200 megawatt PV plant. That also takes a bit long, but we're working with the department there. I'm happy that if you're saying that this is an area that we need to work with, we need to try and see whether we can smooth it. The longest periods for getting construction going or dispatching electrons is the authorization and permitting phase. Once the private sector has its authorizations, they can build in quick time. Of course, there's one or two projects that go through difficulties. Let me tell you, the first project, the solar project, and they did 200 megawatt plants for ARM, African Rainbow Minerals. They built their 2 plants in Lichtenburg. Unfortunately, there's a whole set of difficulties in the municipality, as you know. Lichtenburg has been cited as one of the challenging municipalities. There are allegations of 2 mayors, and so of course you're suddenly running into community issues also, and so these are the other things that you have to factor in, and that's going to be quite important. But this is game changing. That's why I put us on deputy chair. By the way, this allows us to be able to reach our renewable targets much more faster by allowing private sector participation into doing the kind of investment that is there. Let me just say one last thing on this figure. In 18 months, we've estimated close on to 200 billion rand of investment as a result of this. Okay. So here's the point again, sorry. You didn't have this 18 months ago. It was not there. You didn't have 200 billion rand worth of investment. It was not there. None of this was there until you changed that schedule and that regulation that was there. So my apologies for going on, but I think this is game changing. Can I just finish my slides?
I think you should go on. I'm ignoring the hands.
Yes. Next slide.
Yes, I'm in charge here. I'm in charge, and I can do what I want.
But I thought this was an important thing because in the report itself, the Commission raises concerns about the noise that have been made around this issue of decommissioning schedules in light of the energy crisis. The international partner group has raised this. And we're trying to develop a more consistent and clear message on this. And I think it's quite important. So if you screen grab this, please do screen grab it, right? Because I think the message has to be quite clear and consistent. In the context of us having an energy crisis, there is a conversation that we're having, and we're doing an evaluation exercise and an assessment on whether we can delay decommissioning. Delay decommissioning. That's quite important. That's very different to extending the life of power plants. It's quite important to a whole set of other areas that you've heard. So the decommissioning delay is under conversation. But if there is a revised decommission schedule, it will be formed by 3 key points. And I want to read them out because I think it's quite important that in the report that you provide, you do cite this as a high level of uncertainty. A technical assessment of the feasibility and the cost of refurbishing and or repowering each plant. That's currently underway by the National Treasury in terms of 254 billion rand debt relief program. Secondly, a modeling exercise that we have Steve on board, who's helping us, and the PCC. We pulled together DMRE, we pulled together CSIR, we pulled together a whole set of different teams. Joanna's helping us with that. Modeling exercise to estimate the projected future capacity from various sources compared to existing capacity and projected growth in demand being undertaken by NECOM. Very important that. Third, and most important one is, as a result, if we do make a decision based on the evidence that's there, that modeling of the impact on decarbonization trajectory, taking into account the full reduced utilization of the existing fleet, right? And updated decommissioning schedule, should that be, if the assessment gives us that ability to be able to look at delaying decommissioning of certain of the power stations. And the conversation, if I may just pause here, Deputy Chair, is that this exercise should be finished as quickly as possible, July 2023. We're working with the National Treasury Office. So I think it's quite important why we talk about this. Because there are a few, Camden, Grootvlei, Kriel in 2027, decommissioning of a potential 24,000 megawatts. And why the conversation is had in the context of in the context of energy security, is that Mr. Mkwana will say to you that there are 1 or 2 power stations that are actually performing at its end of life quite well. Camden is a good example, 60% EAF. Now, is there a conversation to be had where we could potentially extend the delay of its decommissioning schedule? Because it has 60% EAF. Versus Komati that at 125 when it was close to decommissioning. That's not wise to put more billions of rands into that. Or Indrina, who has already started decommissioning some of its units, right? Similarly with Kriel. Kriel's performance is relatively good until they sort out the milling problem, right? And some of the vacuum tube leaks. Those, but on average, it has about 60 to 70. So that's the conversation but the point here, it shouldn't be thumbsuck. It should be based on a proper evaluation and diagnostic that is guided by Treasury's assessment. So it's evidence-based. And when we do take the decision, we then have to model what it means for our NDC and the work that you've done. So I think it's quite important that we clarify that from a point of view of how we're discussing this from an ESCOM, presidency, PCC, DMRE, and a whole set of different players in this. And the broader public, of course, is. That's important. That's why we're taking you into confidence with this one, Bishop, around this one. So I think that's important for us, and I just wanted to park on that one over there. I'm done now. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this. There are challenges, right? And you can see the one red tape is there. There are a whole lot of other things. The major problem has been the third bullet point, several large operating units. We're working really hard with ESCOM on getting 1, 2, and 3, and 5 back. We think that once we get that back, we see a high degree of stability in the system and meeting some demand. Doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to say, because others misquote me in saying that load shedding will end by the end of this year. I think it's going to be quite critical for us to work on these challenges going forward. Next slide, please. So wave 2 for the electricity sector. And here again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is quite important to look at the reform program. So we're twinning the energy action plan in meeting immediate demands with the reform program in restructuring the electricity sector, Deputy Chairperson. And I think this is quite important. Key to that is creating a competitive generation market space. That requires for us to unbundle transmission. Where are we with that? The minister is not here now, but he's left. Where we are with that is, number 1, getting that operating license, the 3 licenses from NERSA, that's underway. Public consultation has been happened. ESCOM will, of course, be issued those licenses as an independent subsidiary, that transmission company as it is. And of course, Mr. Mkwana and them are in the process of finalizing board appointments for their transmission company. That's important as part of the first phase of separation, because if you want to create a competitive environment, you need to see completely it hived off. So the first phase is a subsidiary, the next phase is moving it out, and it becomes a state-owned entity in itself to allow for that. That's an important area, and there's a whole set of different things of what we put in the Electricity Regulatory Act, which is important. There's a whole thing around the omnibus bill, IRP being reviewed. I've spoken about the National Transmission Company. All in all, that is covered. I mean, most of that is covered in what would be a really interesting conversation also, Deputy Chair, around the Electricity Regulatory Act that's currently before Parliament. The Electricity Regulatory Act is one of the first pieces of legislation that has made some significant changes to the way we will produce and generate electricity for the future. And that's quite critical for us, and it's important perhaps for the commissioners to affiliate themselves with the era as it is right now because it does fundamentally break up a vertically integrated system that we have had for 100 years into a competitive system that allows for different competing generators to sell off to an independent transmission company. My concluding slide, and I'm sorry if I went on. No. So I think there's significant alignment between NECOM and OVE and the PCC on the report that you have on the South Africa electrical system. I think the Energy Action Plan, our electricity reform support a just transition, I want to say this quite clearly, that promotes energy security, energy access, and environment and social sustainability. I think it's important that we provide regular updates. I'm happy to come and do that, Deputy Chair, so you can see the progress that we've made around energy security and reform and a movement to a just transition. And of course, I'm in alignment and support of the PCC in the implementation of the just transition. My apologies if I went on, but I thought that was important. That's why I said these are the more exciting slides.
Thank you very much for it. Let's take the hands now that you have. I saw the leaves and come around.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. So, I mean, it is a game changer, and it is the private sector opting in to solve its own electricity crisis in the best way possible. And it, you know, it's a signal to me of be careful what you wish for, because WWF has been advocating for more renewable energy for over a decade now. But now I worry about this, and perhaps Rudy and others who are more expert in the room can assist me with this. As the private sector generates its own electricity and uses it and wheels it through municipal grids, so there might be a bit of income for municipalities there, Eskom's revenue reduces and reduces. And the thing is, as a public utility, it has a mandate to provide energy access for the poor. And it has been doing that through cross-subsidization from other sources of revenue. And I'm really concerned about electricity for the poor and how we're going to address that in this new landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rudy. That's a very helpful presentation. I just want to say, on a very small scale, we are learning these same lessons and learning them hard. We're just trying to buy 700 megawatts, a drop in the bucket compared to what you are doing, but definitely learning the same lessons around the time for certification. But I just want to also point to a critical point that that causes a lot of extra delay, in that often, because grid capacity is limited, it's a finite resource at the moment, when a project receives a grid allocation, and then that project later falls over because of financing, usually because of financing, that grid capacity is tied up for that entire time. No other project can access it. So even though you have allocated, say, 10,000 megawatts of grid capacity, you don't know that all of those allocated projects will in fact take them up until they either do or don't. It's a complete guessing game. Is there a way that we can better assess the likelihood that those projects will actually reach financial closure before we find out about their failure? There has to be some kind of assessment tool where we can say, you've now had your grid allocation for, say, 3 months. Your ranking on our risk register is going near to the top. You are flashing high red. You have to meet a certain hurdle to prove that you are in genuine process of gaining financial closure. Otherwise, we have to consider reallocating the grid access. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Let's take more of the hands before we. Melissa, were you next?
Thank you. Very, very interesting, and thanks for all that information sharing. I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't hear a lot of talk about air pollution and the minimum emission standards, and just a huge caution on top of all the people who are already dying and sacrificing their bodies for their health and their bodies for electricity generation. please, before we start talking about extending the lives of power stations like Kendall, that has a shocking compliance record and a pollution record, that we just take note of the health impacts of doing so. Thanks.
Chandra?
Thank you, Chairperson. Game changer, yeah, sounds nice. But how insulated it is from alleged pillaging of Eskom by the likes of Pillay and others? Because when facing this crisis currently, and there are serious allegations on the other hand of sabotage, I just want to hear from on that score. Pillaging of Eskom, allegedly by some executives. At least I think we should be given some kind of briefing at this level. We deserve that.
Thank you, Chair. So the other exciting thing that came across my computer yesterday is that 40 municipalities do have the ability or already could allow feed-in. But try and do it. It's impossible. So the question is, why is it impossible for that to actually be operationalized? Is it a technical issue? Is it a policy issue? But it's something that we really need to, because there is a quick community-based response to this issue. I want to just please get us to respond to Louise on taking the energy provision that should be Eskom's away from Eskom by this process, and Eskom becoming a slum energy provider because everybody else looks after themselves. So how do we secure Eskom, strengthen Eskom, so that they are a renewable energy company? And I still want to answer the question, why is Eskom not doing RE? Simple as that. And if there's any legal or policy mechanism that does not allow Eskom to do RE, then I think Minister Mtash is right to say we will continue with coal, because he is, and we have to protect work. Or as was earlier said in Dr. Alva's presentation, the issue of unemployment should be used as an opportunity, but we're not. So Eskom really needs to move into RE, and I don't see why they cannot.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the Chair of Eskom and Rudy can maybe respond to that. But I do want to say, in relation to the work that is being done around the JET IP, that one of the very important and critical areas of work where we are trying to unlock finance, and I think in the context of the Eskom debt restructuring conditions to be able to get finance moving, is in the area of transmission, which is the critical lever at the moment to actually be able to firstly release that pipeline of projects so that they can connect to the grid and that it is easier for them to get ahead, and obviously then has a material impact on the timeframes around ending load shedding. But I think also in terms of the kind of financial models that Eskom is looking at for itself into the future, and setting up that transmission system operator and being able to look at the potential of that in terms of revenue into Eskom, as well as the issues of connectivity of renewables, I think is really a critical thing that we need to also focus on and keep a very careful eye on the speed and the effectiveness of that, as well as what might be needed in terms of policy or other regulatory reform. Thanks.
Chair, a lot of them are comments. I would unfortunately not comment on the Eskom. I think perhaps the chair or perhaps this would have to do. I think I hear what Louise is saying. I think that's an important area. It's quite critical. I mean, the challenge that you do sit with the 254 billion debt relief package that have now in the process of being passed, as put a condition, Bobby, on any further capex, right, particularly in generation. And so that's a moratorium for 3 years. So I would say that that's in the public domain, and I think that would be something. Mayor, you spot on, and I think this is one of the problems that we do sit with, right? And so what we had to do is introduce, which we didn't have before, because it's all new, right? Grid queuing rules. So because it's a queue. It's literally a queue of you all waiting. So the grid queuing rules. And generally the rule was quite simple, first come, first serve, right? And then we had to introduce another element, which basically say, use it or lose it, right? Because that's fundamental. You could sterilize the grid, you could sit on it, right? And you may not get, your authorizations and a whole set of other different things, and then you're sitting with a grid connection. And I think this is part of the conversations that is currently, Eskom has introduced a grid queuing rule process. We've submitted it to NECOM. It has gone to NERSA. It's under current public consideration. That framework will be there that says exactly that. If you're unable to show an indication that you're going to construct, not construct within 6 months, right? Or complete the construction in 6 months, but simply that if you're not going to show an intent to use it, then you should give it to someone else who's ready. The principle for us is quite simple, Deputy Chair and NECOM. We need more megawatts onto the grid as quick as possible. That's what it is fundamentally. Not for you to sit onto it for years to come, and then you indicate you're waiting for either better PPA or whatever pricing arrangement or a whole set of different things. I mean, Bobby, I think the real, I thought that Commissioner, on the air pollution, I agree with you. I think those issues have to be taken into consideration around that. General Misa, I won't comment on that. I think that's an Eskom decision to comment on that. Bobby, speak to Mayor Lewis about how they've introduced the feed-in. The key thing here is there's a price that you set, and you're prepared to pay that for anyone that's prepared to feed into that. But it is a costly exercise, and that's really what you need to do. I mean, you need to make a decision, a clear policy decision, number one, and how you're going to fund that. I know that he's been asking for Treasury Finance to extend the program. I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen the recent data, Mayor Lewis, about how much households have taken up that. I mean, one of the biggest challenges has also the feeding has been the wheeling, but we've been able to resolve it in the laws. And that's quite important, because when you build your plant and you want to dispatch your electrons across the grid, you have to go through very different distributors and then get into that. And we had a challenge of Corolenia. There was a particular set of challenge, and it would fundamentally have impacted on all other municipalities. But we were able to resolve that because Eskom had asked for a condition for wheeling around deposits, and if you're not building new infrastructure and connections, why do you want a deposit? And I think the principle now has been that no deposits would be required for municipalities to get an agreement with Eskom for wheeling. Now, all three segments in the SSEG space, Bobby, are quite important and fundamental. Right now, there's the net billing framework, right? And that's I've shared with the commissioners. It's currently in front of NERSA. It will be considered. It's the framework, and I think that's important. The specific pricing decisions on how you deal with it is a municipal function. We are in the process of finalizing a feed-in tariff policy also. Again, that's a guide. And most importantly, a wheeling framework to help other municipalities. Again, it's a guide. Distributors will have to make their own decisions around each and every one of them. But it's important to provide that kind of guidance so we don't have missteps around how these electrons are moving across distribution and transmission networks across the South African landscape. Thank you, Deputy Chair.
No. Go ahead, yes.
Hi, sorry, I had raised my hand. May I ask a question?
Yeah, this is a meeting of commissioners.
Oh, apologies.
Afterwards. You can ask him afterwards privately, yeah.
Mr. Dix, just to say, I hope that you saw yesterday that our wheeling project got the green light yesterday. We've got our first 40 customers and 25 producers, and the first electrons will flow on the 1st of July. But I just wanted to check with you about the work of NECOM. Obviously impressive and hope-giving. From the perspective of local government, the finance and the financial implications, which you've touched on now, we've been in discussion with Treasury about that. But there are seriously profound financial implications for local government. So I understand that the work of NECOM is obviously primarily focused on the emergency, but much of the alleviation of the emergency relates to what local governments can be doing and are doing. But along with that has got to come consideration of what it does to our finances, because there is serious, very serious existential risk. At the moment, we are able to cope with that risk. And the reason for that, frankly, is because we're still dealing with relatively small numbers. Even at the moment, we're getting about 1,000 applications a month for feed-in. Now that sounds like a large number, but we've got 750,000 electricity consumers in Cape Town, probably double that number in Johannesburg. So, 1,000 a month it's manageable. What happens when that becomes 20,000? Then we have a big problem on our hands. And then the letters to Treasury are going to become increasingly more panicky. So I just wonder whether this is featuring in your work.
I just add to that, because that's a very important matter. You were not here, Rudy, when we had the mayor of Johannesburg talk to us at one of our commission's meeting, Mayor Mpumalanga, and she came with a councillor who was in charge of electricity. What was his name? The councillor. Michael Son. Yeah. And they said very clearly that they're not in favor of rooftop solar, because they said these are their customers that they're selling electricity to. How are they going to run the city if they can't sell electricity? They were blunt about it. That was quite brave of them to say to the Climate Commission that they're not in favor of rooftop solar. But it was really because of this question the mayor is raising, and you know that very well, because it doesn't work out. If the economic model doesn't work out, it's not going to happen, because if 20,000 people in Cape Town, customers, go rooftop, then the city power is not going to have the money to keep the city power infrastructure running to start off with. So that's going to get more breakdowns of substations, more breakdowns of everything else. And it's something that government has to look at. I mean, it's just been, I'm telling you something you know. You don't have to say anything, because you know this thing. But do you want the commission to do some work? Or Treasury knows it. Everybody knows the story. So we're trying to encourage solar rooftop with this thing. And then Bobby's got another angle to the whole thing and say that those of us sitting in this room, part of the elite, will all have solar on our roofs. But what about the people who can't afford it? And then you've got, then their situation becomes even worse. So I don't know, should we do some work on this? Because it comes up, it's a regular thing, and government doesn't have the answer. I mean, there's no point asking Rudy to say what's the answer.
I agree with you, Deputy Chair. I mean, I think this is really an area of work. I mean, I know that the CSIR has done, I know that the CSIR has done some work around how one could deal with. Remember, I mean, for most municipalities, electricity is the cash cow, is the biggest component. No,
that's right? How it's structured.
Up to about 50% of total municipal revenue comes from that. But there are mechanisms that have been looked at, and that's why I think there's a general misunderstanding and the work that's been done around how you could recover.
Yeah, but we need to tackle this. So the way we have designed our system of governance, municipalities are dependent on fossil fuel to survive as municipalities. That's how it is now. If it's not for fossil fuel, they collapse. They survive on fossil fuel. And so we can preach as much as we want to. It's the bread and butter for municipalities over there. But Steve, you would have give us some of your thoughts here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the recommendations that we make in the electricity recommendations report is directly on this issue, that the president needs to sponsor a study on pricing, both at an ESCOM level, because pricing doesn't allow much sustainability for ESCOM either, but specifically at a municipal level, because to the mayor's point, this will drive municipal funding models in the future.
So when can we deal with it in the commission? Then we get the relevant government people here. We ask the treasury people to come. We talk about this thing. We ask the big metros to send their people in the discussion. Shouldn't we do that? Yes. So, okay, you think about it, and maybe at the next or the following meeting when we are ready, because it just comes up all the time. I mean, the most starkly, as I said, the mayor of Johannesburg said we're not in favor of this thing. And you can fully understand it.
Yeah, Chair, we flagged this as a key area in our recommendations. We recommended such a study as done, and I think if we could take an offline discussion with Rudy about who will do the work, and let's get this moving, and we can either support you doing it or you can support us doing it. We'll work it out.
Bobby, last comment?
So it's just really the frustration is a personal experience where none of the technicians that come to the premises know whether they can or cannot connect to the grid. It's a simple technical issue, and you never get the one story. Is it possible, is it not? And I think a lot of people are not, they don't mind giving the electricity into the grid, because the more electricity that goes into the grid, even if we're not paid for that, it means the grid has more electricity for the poor. But we just don't have an answer on that, and we are investigating that. So I'm meeting on Wednesday with the team to understand that. But that's the level of uncertainty and mixed messages and poor communication at a municipality level.
Yeah, Commissioner Pukunsi, you dealt with this issue very well when you spoke to us the last time. Let's leave it at that for now, but I think we're going to need you people in local government, maybe Salga also, just to raise this thing a bit more sharply. Okay, but let's leave it at that, because otherwise we'll run out of time, because we've got to end this meeting at 1 o'clock. We're now going on to the reports from the committees, and we won't take all of them because not all of the commissioners are here, fortunately.
Melissa would like to go first. She's unfortunately got to leave for a catch.
Oh, Melissa wants to go first, but then she also will be very quick, I'm sure. Melissa?
Indeed. Thanks, Deputy Chair. I'm going to report on the work of the Monitoring and Evaluation Committee.
On a point of order, Chairperson.
Take a point of order in a moment. Let Melissa finish. She's got to go to the airport. Finish, Melissa.
Sure. All right, so the Monitoring and Evaluation Working Group is working on 3 big outputs for the Commission. The first is a monitoring, evaluation and learning framework, which is also linked to the Just Transition Implementation Plan that is being developed for the Commission by MISTRA. And I should also just distinguish this, I know there's a lot of talk of M&E, from the M&E that's being planned for the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. So these are separate but parallel processes that of course speak to each other. As a part of this process, we are developing an overall theory of change for the Just Transition, which is quite a challenge when you think about it. What conditions do we need to be in place for us to meet the goal of the Just Transition as we've stated it in the Just Transition framework? So quite an interesting project. There's a whole process underway there in terms of doing theories of change per vulnerable sector, and then also expanding that to other sectors like tourism, the built environment, land, health, etc. So there's going to be what they call a causality mapping, and then identifying evidence and indicators so that we can enable this learning process. And there will also be stakeholder engagement around this, so a flag for Blessing and his team. The second big output is the State of Climate Action Report, which is actually really exciting. It's subtitled, or it's titled at the moment, working title is Beyond the Numbers, the Real State of Climate Action in South Africa, which is going to be based on 3 components. The first being data, looking at all the data that's been collected on climate action by all the social partners, not just government, but all the social partners, and looking at where gaps are and what additional steps need to be taken to progress climate action in the country. The second part is about stories, really lives and livelihoods of workers, communities, households impacted by climate change and impacted by the transition, really kind of encouraging a deeper understanding of how this is playing out for people. And then the third part is a perception study, which is about kind of trying to get a sense, a cross-section of the population's understanding of what they think about South Africa's progress on climate change and the just transition. So yeah, a very exciting piece of work. It's going to be brought to the Commission in 2024 beginning, as my understanding, but there will be opportunities to highlight portions of this work as it becomes available. The third and very last thing is just to say that we are also doing a kind of ad hoc evidence-based analysis in support of the PCC's work on monitoring evaluation, the first being the Komati site visit. So many of you will know that on 7 July, the Commission's going to do a site visit at Komati Power Station. Lots of talk about that earlier. Obviously, please go. It'll be fantastic to have a big delegation there of commissioners, but there's a briefing that's being prepared based on work from a broad range of social partners in this room represented that will prepare everyone who's going to do that, and then afterwards there'll be a reflection document compiled. So that's it. Thanks, Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to the state of the climate report. I think that's going to be exciting. Commissioner Holomisa?
I was going to remind you that there is a hanging question I asked, and it was referred to the Commissioner representing ESCOM. Thank you.
No, I noted that Rudy is the person who was making the presentation. He can't deal with a question. He says, I don't know the answer. That's basically what he has said. So he's not the one to refer questions to anybody else. He's done the present. We'll get the presentation from ESCOM at the right time, and then we can ask them all those questions. There wasn't that on the table. So
all right, thank you.
I don't want us to deal with it in a haphazard way. Yeah. Gideon Serfontein is going to give us the finance and governance report.
Yeah, Deputy Chair, thank you very much. The agenda was distributed, and I have no intention to go into that. It is just to say that we've met, but more importantly, and I think for the commissioners to take note, Crispian has in his report referred to the move and the alignment to NETLAG that to a large extent has been done now. The significance of that, and that's what I want to highlight, is that it has been a difficult road up to now, given the interministerial nature of the Commission, to find an administrative home, to find a regulatory framework. So with the move to or the alignment with NETLAG, the Secretariat has got that. The challenge for the committee is now obviously to find the balance. And what is the balance? So that we could empower, enable the Executive Secretariat to do their work, but also to a large extent to give them guidance, the requirements within which they need to do it. And in his report, the Executive Director did focus on the business plans, on the budget, and on the risk register. So where we are now is, and that's my concluding remarks, it is a relief to provide feedback that significant progress has been made. The debates in the committee meetings is now not more on what should be done, but it is on how. And I think that is important to take note of that. Lastly, it is our intention to find the right balance between putting the brakes on and releasing the executive and the commission to do what they should be doing. So, Chairperson, I want to conclude on that. I think it's significant that we're getting there, where the focus is now on how things should be done and not what should be done.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Likalakala.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the appointment of Commissioner Lebohang Mulaudzi as the new COO of the Commission. And to the young people, I think you're in good hands. Commissioner Mulaudzi is still in that threshold age group of 35 and less. And that information is based on the fact that she's still part of the NYDA, National Youth Development Agency. She serves there. So I would say that this commission is very progressive in that it puts young people first, and you can also see with the staff component that it's mostly young people. So you're at home. The climate adaptation and resilience working groups continues to meet, and we're looking at a variety of issues. And one of the things is, I'm just going to highlight some of the stuff that we're saying we're going to prioritize. I'm not going to go back to what is at stake now, the context now, but we know that it is important that adaptation becomes a long-term project. We can have winning mitigation, and the more we mitigate, we also need to have adaptation plans. So part of what we're looking at and focusing on is around climate warning systems that would enable both climate early warning for short-term disaster mitigation and successive responses, as well as long-term adaptation investment prioritization. One of the focus is around the development of subnational climate resilient development strategies following the principles of the climate resilient development pathways as initiated by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from the Working Group 6. The picture that was painted, it's a very scary picture. And with due respect, I just hoped that Mr. Mantashe may have an insight of what that report says, because some of the stuff that he said this morning, I was like shrugging and not believing that that comes from the minister who serves in the cabinet of the country, whilst being aware that the country had taken or had made commitments internationally around some of these issues. And it seems like maybe, I don't know, but sometimes I feel like maybe we need to have an audience with him separately, just to understand where he comes from and where we are, and that this Presidential Climate Commission has been initiated because of the commitment that the country has done internationally around reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The other important work that the working group is focused on, it's around the gap analysis and development of climate smart sectoral strategies, with the priorities or prioritizing agriculture, water, and the built environment. The project and suit on functional climate models that would include building capacity and agency in all major social partner groups, with and prioritizing peer learning as a priority intervention. The other focus work that we're going to be, or that we are planning on, is around the climate adaptation scenario modeling to better visualize the option pathways, building on the successes of the mitigation modeling that we have. I want to say that on sorry, I think I missed a point here. On the development of subnational provincial climate resilient strategies, we had an engagement yesterday in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, and these are the same kind of engagements that are also happening around eThekwini and Mpumalanga. And we hope that some of the processes that are taking place and some of the engagement, this is going to be a learning space, not only for other cities and municipalities in the country, but in the region and in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have the two commissioners here, Lebogang Molaisi and Shamini Harrington, but I was told that Steve will say something about it. Steve, do you need to say anything, or can we hold this on for the next meeting when the commissioners are here?
Happy to hold it, Chair.
Good. We'll give them a chance to report when they are here at the next meeting. We then have the minutes of the 24th of February 2023 for your approval. Can we approve the minutes? Does anybody want any changes to the minutes? If not, thank you very much. Then they are approved. And announcement about lunch or anything, does anybody know? Non-Clank? Just announce it loudly, put your thing on your...
At the lunch is at the same place we had it last time, upstairs. You just go through this passageway and you go up the stairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. See you in September. Thank you. Thank you. I hope we'll see you in September, Mr.